Adam, thank you very much. You make a really interesting point in your latest about we're now into October when Saturday comes, and there's a lot of undefeated teams. But what do we know about these teams, and what are they going to prove or not prove here? Good afternoon.
Yeah, good afternoon, Paul. Always good to be with you. It's a big week for those undefeated teams, at least some of them that are going to face their first true test of the season. There's been hype about Michigan and some of their lopsided wins early. They go to Wisconsin, where they've been horrible really since the last 2 decades. They've been blown out the last 4 times. This is kind of a prove-it game for them. In the SEC, that's certainly the case for Ole Miss. Going to Alabama, they've looked great, but this is a huge step up, obviously. Same thing for Kentucky. Kentucky's 4-0, but in talking to head coach Mark Stoops on Sunday, he knows they have a long way to go and a lot of things to clean up. You can't be the worst turnover margin team in the country and expect to win week after week. They obviously get Florida, so we're going to know exactly where they stand. So some of the teams that I included in that piece have passed some tests to a degree. Maryland has a win against West Virginia. They have Iowa coming in on Friday night. Baylor just beat Iowa State, but Iowa State not the team that we thought they would be coming into the year, preseason number 7. Now Baylor goes to Oklahoma State, which is also 4-0 on the road. Can Dave Aranda's team get it done and stay undefeated? So we're going to know a lot more really these next 2 or 3 weeks, but especially this week.
Let me start with Ole Miss, because the numbers are gaudy, but the opposition is pretty weak in the 3 games. And we're going to have Lane on here in about 90 minutes, and I don't think he'd argue with any of those points. Why should we believe they're capable of going into Tuscaloosa and winning?
Paul, I think it's clear that the type of team that gives Alabama trouble, at least offensively, is what Ole Miss reflects. They did it last year in Lane's first year. And then you also look at what Dan Mullen has done with the last few Florida teams. There's a lot more similarities to what Ole Miss is going to be bringing into Bryant-Denny Stadium this weekend. And I think, obviously Nick Saban's had great success against all of his assistants, and Lane Kiffin is in that group. But Lane philosophically is really independent, at least from a schematic point of view. He brought his independent scheme into Alabama, revolutionized that offense, and then left. I think he took some of the important head coaching things away from Saban, but I don't think he's necessarily philosophically like a lot of the Nick Saban assistants that Nick has beaten over the years. So I think that's why that gives them an edge. Now, defensively, they're going to have to get a lot better. As you know, you look at the numbers from last year's game, it was almost inconceivable to allow that many yards on that many plays. And that's how bad they were defensively. They seem to have taken a step forward. How big of a step, especially on the road, we're going to find out. But I think at least the offense, from what Matt Corral does to the big play threats at running back and receiver, that's the style of offense, at least, that has given Nick Saban some trouble over the years, whether it was Ole Miss with Hugh Freeze or Auburn with Gus Malzahn, or more recently, Dan Mullen in Florida.
And you mentioned Kentucky. I want to talk about them for a second, Adam, because they get no respect. Now, I will agree, they haven't really, well, they beat Missouri, but what do you make out of Mark Stoops' team? And certainly a win over Florida would help wreck Dan Mullen's team, but it would also suddenly make Kentucky into a viable threat for Georgia, would it not?
Absolutely, especially because Florida would have 2 losses, although only one in the division to this point. But I think it would be a huge opportunity for Kentucky. And it really does say something about them, Paul, that they haven't played that well, and they're still 4-0. It talks about the recruiting that they've done, the depth that they've developed. They've been pretty strong on defense. And I think they're -9 in turnovers for the season. That's at the bottom of the FBS. And normally you look at the other teams that are down there, they're 0-4, they're 1-3, they're 2-2, they're not 4-0. So while Mark is very cognizant of the fact they have to change that against Florida, it does show that they're talented enough to stay in these games and ultimately win these games. They're going to have to take better care of the ball. They have a new play caller. Liam Cohen coming in from the Rams, obviously a new quarterback, and Will Levis from Penn State, and then their top offensive playmaker, Wan'Dale Robinson, also coming in from the outside, transferring from Nebraska. So a lot of new faces on that offense, and it's still coming together. If they can click and they can play cleanly, I think it's gonna give Florida some trouble in this game, especially playing in Lexington. And really this upcoming stretch, which is Florida, LSU, Georgia, I believe, we're going to find out exactly where this Kentucky team is. They've gotten a lot of credit. I think they've invested in their program, but they only have one season, Paul, as you know, of more than 7 wins under Mark Stoops. So this is that chance to have that true breakthrough and really challenge for the SEC East, but they're going to have to win against Florida.
I want to ask you about another game. I don't think you mentioned the team earlier, but they're also undefeated, and they have accomplished a lot. No one should take anything away from the Razorbacks, but still, as much as they have accomplished, why should we believe, I'm not saying you do, but why should anyone believe other than Razorback fans that they can go into Athens and win this game?
Well, I think it's a team that's gaining a lot of confidence, and it's a veteran team. I spoke with Sam Pittman last week about the fact that he brought back so much on both sides of the ball, even though they were breaking in a new quarterback and a couple of new pieces. Along the line of scrimmage, it's very familiar, even though they've had some injuries on the offensive line. You know, they showed they can match up with the Texas A&M, even with a kind of rebuilding or at least the starting over Texas team under Sark. And this is a much bigger challenge. But I like the fact that they're experienced. I like the fact that the head coach has familiarity with the opponent, having worked under Kirby Smart in Georgia. And I don't think the Hogs are going to be necessarily intimidated in that environment, although they have to be aware of how difficult it will be to run the football, to score points. Their defense, which is really their calling card under Barry Odom with all that experience, they're going to have to stay in this game and get it into the second half and make Georgia earn its points. We haven't seen that as much other than Clemson with Georgia's opponents. So this is going to be a much tougher task for Georgia's offense, just as it will Arkansas's offense. But I like the combination of experience and physical line of scrimmage play, plus that familiarity that Sam has with Kirby and that Georgia program.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.